What's up, guys? We're going to quickly go over what size dropper post you need for your bike. So, to get two of the easiest parts out of the way, number one easy part is seat tube diameter. So, most common one on mountain bikes these days is 30.9 and 31.6. So, you're probably going to see a ton of dropper posts in those sizes available because those are the two most common seat post sizes for mountain bikes. There is 27.2 available for some of those, probably older steel hardtails and other things like that. And there is also kind of a newer trend is those bigger dropper posts, which is a 34.9. But 27.2 and 34.9, bit more rare, not as common at all as the 30.9 or 31.6. So figure out your seat tube diameter. That's step one. Step two is the cable routing. So you can see this post I got in my hand right here. The cable connects to it at the bottom. So that's referred to as internal routing or stealth routing. I think RockShox Reverb kind of coined the term stealth routing, but that's where the cable actually comes in from the bottom. So you need to know what's going to work on your bike. So you can see on this bike right here, Yeti's got an internally routed cable. So you don't see any cable coming up because the actual cable for this post is internal, runs in here, and actually comes out right there. So that's an internal one. The external posts probably, a lot of bikes these days have what they call internal or stealth routing for dropper posts. Some of the older ones might not, and you might need the external one where the cable is going to connect to something right here, connect up here. So seat post diameter and cable routing, those are the two simple parts. The more complicated part, so now you've got some travel options. So the actual travel of the dropper post. So there's anywhere from, and I think 60 all the way to like 170 now, 180. There's a whole bunch of different ones. The most common dropper post travel is 125 millimeters, that's about 5 inches. So that's the most common. 150 is becoming really popular too. Everyone's just trying to run bigger and bigger drops these days. So that's another thing to consider. The issue with travel. So as you can see on this bike here,
Today, Junior?
If your saddle height, you're kind of like at full leg extension, like when you're climbing or like you'd have it set up on a road bike, if that was your case, but your seat needed to be down here, this dropper wouldn't fit because there'd be too much travel, so you wouldn't be able to put your seat low enough. So that's a big consideration is for your actual saddle height, like this right here, are you going to be able to accommodate that, or is it going to have too much travel? In which case, if you run your measurements, maybe you're like, oh, 125 is too big, but I could fit a 100 mil dropper on there. Or maybe you measure it out and you say, oh, I got plenty of room for a 125, maybe I could fit a 150 or a 170 on there. So those measurements are a bit complicated. There's going to be a link below this video that's got some more diagrams that kind of explains that a little bit better, but it is pretty complex. So a lot of these dropper posts, they're going to give you an overall length in the description of each one you're looking at, and that overall length is going to be from where the saddle rail is to typically the bottom of the post, or the bottom of where the little portal comes out, and you got to pay attention to that, right? So then you're going to want to again go to your bike without a dropper on it. Make sure that your saddle's at sort of its max height, meaning when you got a slight bend in your knee when you're in your climbing position. Once you're there, you're going to measure that from your seat rail all the way down here, and you pretty much just want to figure out how far down the insertion depth can you actually put this. So you can see, like on this bike right here, obviously this frame, you can only put this so far down. So if I needed to put this down here, I can tell that's probably not going to fit because this is probably going to run into here. So this particular post, if I needed to run it this far down and still get the proper saddle height, that's not going to work. So it's going to need to be further up like this, and then is my proper saddle height here, or does it need to go higher? So this is where it gets a little complicated, and you want to pay attention to the travel of the dropper post, and then that overall length, and then the actual saddle height that you're using, and kind of do the math there to figure out if you have the correct amount of insertion depth, and if so, then what does that allow you to run? Does it allow you to run a 170 dropper, a 125, a 100, etc.? So it's a little bit confusing. Like I said, link below with some more of the specifications on that. And again, feel free to bug us about it. We kind of eat, sleep, and breathe mountain bikes and are happy to answer questions around that. Dropper posts are really common these days, so you probably already have a bike with one on there. If you don't, this video is definitely relevant to you. If you do have a bike with a dropper on there and you're thinking, hey, I want more travel, how do I know if it's going to fit? So in that case, again, it all boils back down to just taking some measurements and seeing what's going to work. So, you know, if you look at this post here, I believe it's a 150. Say you wanted to run a 170. So you know that if you do run a 170, this is going to lower here. And then you're going to want to pay attention to your insertion depth and make sure it's not going too deep to where your frame bottoms out. And all frames are different, right? So some frames you might only have so much insertion depth available. Other ones are going to have, you know, even a longer tube than this one. Yetis have got pretty long amount of insertion depth, so it's a pretty easy, I would say, an easier bike to fit a dropper post on without having to worry too much about it being you know, too little of insertion depth. But so those are some of the basics. And again, I know it is a complicated subject and pretty hard to figure out, and it does require doing some math and taking some measurements on your own bike. But that's part of it, to make sure that it does fit and it's not going to end up being too tall for you or too short for you, which is less common of a problem. But typical problem would be, you know, a lot of people don't have enough exposed post up here, and then they just simply can't fit a dropper post, so they need to go to like 100 mil travel or an 80 mil travel or something like that. And otherwise, you know, depending on if your frame's a little too big for you, if your frame's a little too small for you, you know, the actual seat tube size of your frame. So there's a lot of measurements to factor in here, but hopefully that cleared up some of the confusion and didn't make it more confusing. Thank you guys for watching. Feel free to leave a comment below and let us know what dropper post you're running and if it was a nightmare for you to figure out what size you needed for your bike. If you're considering buying a dropper post, we have got a bunch of other videos on dropper posts that should appear here. And yeah, leave us a comment, let us know what post you're running, and any other questions or concerns you might have. Feel free to shoot us an email at info@worldwidecyclery, and stay in touch. And I've been told I forgot to tell you to please subscribe and thumbs up the video.